I'm a little sweaty right now. I started freaking out because I couldn't get logged on. All right, so yeah, I think we're ready for the pledge, and then we'll get going.
Pledge.
Okay.
Let's go, Jax.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Amen, Jax. Amen, my brother.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Jax.
All right, so
All right.
I'm going to jump right into this now.
Stop my share.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, so jump right into it here. Real quick about last week. I was fine. I just didn't feel good, but honestly, I just needed a break. I was a little run down. It's a lot of preparing every week for me. And I think between that, I was getting a little sick. So I took a week off. So no worries though. It's not going to happen a lot. Every now and then I might just need a week off.
No dedication.
Right. Yeah. Ask my wife if there's dedication, right? There's a lot of dedication here. So when I was going through this thing, and I already had the First Amendment done, I got my whole presentation done. But as I started talking, as I was practicing it today, there were just things that I kept wanting to go back to talk about that it was just all over the place with the First Amendment about how we got to where we are here. So it occurred to me we probably need to go over just a quick overview on the Bill of Rights and how we ended up with the Bill of Rights. And it's kind of interesting, especially for those of you that have like a 1 and 2 that have never read the Constitution, don't understand the Constitution. So at 4:30 this afternoon, I decided to make an entirely new presentation on just the Bill of Rights and a quick overview on it. So I hope this goes well. I didn't really even have time to practice it. I am using one of the templates that I know half of you don't like here, where you can't see me, but I like the template. So I'll just go back and forth between me and the template when we get there. So does anybody have anything from last week or the week before? Did you guys do the after last week?
Even if I didn't
Nobody did? Not even Dan? Dan was probably there by himself.
We just continued the after from the week before.
All right.
We never
All right.
stopped.
All right, fair enough. All right.
Hey, where's
so
your Bill of Rights shirt?
well, yeah, I should have it on,
Just saying.
This is my "We're not descended from fearful men" shirt. I should wear it during the Second Amendment. So anyway, we'll get into this now. If you guys have anything, obviously, like I've always said, this isn't a class, it's just a discussion. So there's not going to be a lot of slides here where we're reading things because there's not a lot to read when we're talking about an overview and just the history of the Bill of Rights. It's going to be a general overview. I know, how do you say your name? Daniela? Is that right?
Yep, that's it, Daniela.
Daniela, okay. I know Daniela had left a comment, and all those things that you want to talk about, I'm totally on board with, and we will get to those, especially with the First Amendment. I'm hoping we can do the First Amendment in 1 week. We'll see. Tonight's going to be a kind of a general overview. We are going to touch on one of the things that you had mentioned, though, with the Federalist, how they believed that that this was just de facto a Bill of Rights. So let's get into the Bill of Rights now. I think the first thing that you need to understand is that the Bill of Rights did not always exist. It actually almost didn't exist at all. When the Constitution was done, and Madison, who was the father of the Constitution, realized that the Constitution was going to be in peril here. We were just coming off a bloody revolution. Nobody trusted government at that point, right? We're coming off the monarchy who was able to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, to whoever they wanted, and there was really nothing you could do about it. So he knew that the Constitution was going to be in peril here if something wasn't done when it comes to the Bill of Rights. Now, there were two separate groups that were at play here, right? We had the Federalists, and the Federalists believe in a strong central government, strong national government. They believe not that the government should be all powerful, that they should be able to do whatever they want to do, but just that they should be able to control everything that has to do with government, right? With the Federal Reserve, with currency, with commerce, and that the states really probably shouldn't be left to their own devices, that they needed dad to be able to tell them what to do. And there were a lot of big prominent people there that were Federalist. You had people like George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and Madison, who was the father of the Constitution, were all Federalists, all believed that the federal government should be strong enough and should have the power to dictate what the states do. Now, on the flip side of that, you had the anti-federalist, right? And they believe in a strong local government. And reading about the anti-federalist and the federalist, while I love Madison and I love Washington, obviously, I think I'm an anti-federalist right now, but these are different times. I'm an anti-federalist now, which I'm sure most of you guys are anti-federalist now that you are watching how this thing's playing out, right? Government's out of control. I'd like to meet a true federalist right now that believes the government should have more power. But these were different times back then. The government wasn't out of control because it was just being built. But the anti-federalists, which still had some big names like Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, who is huge today in our talk, and Patrick Henry, big names. And they believed that the government should be very limited in what they are allowed to do, and that most of the decisions for the states need to be made by the states. So, I mean, looking back now, I mean, back then, I don't know how I would feel, I guess, coming off the heels of a revolution, a bloody revolution. But you got to remember, man, the Federalists and most of the people in that time were anti-Federalist because they were so mad at Great Britain. They just fought this revolution to break away from that. And the last thing they wanted was the government to be able to come in here and tell them what they were going to do, or to make the rules as they went, like Great Britain did. David, if you have anything, because I know you've got some stuff you want to read, just interrupt me at any point.
Okay, I have something I could add here.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just read briefly from a text, American Government by Walter Volckemer. That's an excellent book. And I'll just, this echoes exactly what you had to say, Jim. Let's see here. The Anti-Federalists wrote numerous pamphlets and newspaper articles setting forth their reasons for opposing the Constitution. The authors of these works signed their names as people from the ancient Roman Republic often. In one of these, Brutus expressed his fear the proposed Constitution would create a highly centralized government that would exercise power over the entire nation. Such a government would inevitably become arbitrary and would ultimately eliminate the states altogether. To Brutus and the other anti-federalists, a republic could not survive unless it was geographically small, like the Greek and Roman republics, and the citizens close to those who governed them. The absence of a Bill of Rights was by far the most effective argument of the anti-federalists. While the Constitution did contain some protections, the right to a jury trial in criminal cases, a narrow definition of the crime of treason, and restrictions on the power of government to pass ex post facto laws, bills of attainder, and suspend the writ of habeas corpus, the Anti-Federalists believed that these were not sufficient. Unless the basic rights of the people were enumerated in the Constitution, the national government would ignore them.
For sure. Why were they writing under pseudonyms?
That was a common thing that was done back then. You remember the Federalist Papers were written under pseudonyms, and I'm not exactly sure. It says it was a common practice in political writings of the 18th century. I don't know if people were worried about being associated with it. I don't know that at the time that people generally knew who was writing.
I mean, I can see it during the Declaration times. I can see it because you're risking everything, right? I mean,
Right.
if this thing doesn't work, you're getting hung, your family's getting
Exactly.
hung, your
Exactly.
property's all going to get divided up. I get that, but
Yep, that would make sense then. Yep,
come the time of the Constitution, we were pretty well set.
right? That's a good
As a
question.
country. Huh. All right, right on. Well, everything you said, we're going to get into a little more common speak though than that. Let's get into what happens with the Bill of Rights. So the way it happens is George Mason's our guy, man, right? And we're going to talk about George Mason. So once the Constitution was drafted, they were done with this thing. They'd been there for a month. Everybody's tired. Everybody wants to go home. And George Mason's that guy, right? Who at the end of this thing is just kind of like, hey, hey fellas, I got a little something here. So it's kind of like when you're in a meeting, right? Or training for work, or you're at school and it's a Friday and it's 3 o'clock. Everybody wants to go home. Everybody's just done with this. You're thinking about a glass of wine you're going to have, spend time with the family, going out to dinner, whatever it is you're going to do. And there's that one guy sitting back in the corner who's just bugged everybody, the whole class. And the teacher's getting ready to go and you're putting all your books away. You're not even listening anymore. And then here's this guy, raises his hand. He's got a quick question. And everybody's like, this guy. And then the instructor says, you know what? That's a great question. If everybody could open up to page 10 of your workbook and let's talk about this. And everybody's like, oh, God. Well, that is how they felt with George Mason, I'm sure, because there was a lot of pushback here. So George Mason says, hey, I think we need a Bill of Rights. Now, remember, the Federalists, they're strong central government, right? They think that the Constitution is going to be just fine the way it's written. Now, a little side note here, George Mason, if you remember, we were talking about Article 5, which was one of the most brilliant articles in the Constitution as far as amending the Constitution. George Mason's the one who, as an afterthought, brought it up and said, hey, guys, I think maybe we should have some kind of way for the people to be able to amend the Constitution without the stupid government getting involved, right? So George Mason's good for kind of afterthought, sort of like, I got something. So he did it again here. And when he does that, you get all the Federalists. Now, remember, everybody's tired. Everybody wants to go home. They got this great Constitution that they wrote, absolutely brilliant, and they think it's going to be good enough. Madison and the rest of the Federalists were like, this guy, right? Madison argues this thing. All the rest of the Federalists argue this thing. And their argument is, look, we don't need a Bill of Rights, right? We've already got this great Constitution. And if it doesn't say in the Constitution the government can do it, they can't do it. This is what authorizes them to be able to do what they're going to do. But Mason's thing is like, here's the deal, though. We talk about this protecting the states, but there's not a whole lot of individual liberty in this thing, right? That's what I'm worried about. And that's what I'm sure all my people are going to be worried about. There's no individual liberty in this. So then the Federalists counter this with, well, hold on. If we start putting rights in here, we're going to have to put them all in here, right? If we just list a couple of them, then does that mean what we don't list, the government's just going to be able to trample because we didn't put it in this list? So ultimately, they kind of blow off George Mason. And they went ahead and signed the Constitution. The framers signed it and they sent it out. And what happens at that point, there's no internet, right? We had newspapers, there's no TV. So what happens is they start printing off these pamphlets that have the Constitution, they're handing them out. They're showing up in newspapers and people are reading this Constitution. And there's a whole lot of George Masons out there. There's a whole lot of people that are reading this thing and like, this is all great, but what about us? Right? What the Federalists had going against them is there was already 8 states that had bills of rights, a Bill of Rights. And one of those states, Virginia, actually had their Bill of Rights almost a year before the Declaration was even written. So back in 1776. And a little trivia here. Do you know who wrote that Bill of Rights for Virginia? Anybody?
Guessing George Mason?
George Mason, our boy. which kind of confuses me, because if George Mason back in 1776 realized that there needs to be a Bill of Rights, why he didn't get this talked about before everybody was tired and done and getting ready to sign this thing and go home. I don't know if he was just, and maybe the answer is out there, maybe I just need to read a little further on it. I don't know if he was just waiting for it, assuming it was coming. And then all of a sudden they're like, all right, we're done. Everybody sign it. And he's like, whoa, 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 hold on. I don't know. I don't know what, but obviously this was very important to George Mason. But the Federalists start realizing quickly that they've got a problem here, that George Mason was right, and that they are not going to get this thing passed. The states are not going to ratify it without having a Bill of Rights in there. So ultimately what happens is, this goes back and forth. The states are all debating it for a year, 2 years. Madison realizes that, look, man, this thing is not going to go. And if this does not go, there's going to be a second constitutional convention called. There's going to be a second convention, and this document that we have spent all this time on, that we have perfectly, beautifully crafted, is going to be ripped apart. Now, maybe some of it stays, or maybe it's like the Articles of Confederation, where they just pick and choose a few things there that they like, but that, basically it gets gutted. So now he's got a problem on his hands. So what Madison does is, and you remember we talked about this when we were talking about Article 7 with the ratification, is that he promises these states that, hey, look, if you ratify this thing, and you got holdouts like North Carolina that are like, nope, not going to do it. He says, look, if you will ratify this thing, I will get a Bill of Rights proposed quickly. And what it ultimately is a campaign promise, because at that point he's running for Congress for the very first seating of Congress. So it turns into a campaign promise for Madison, and he manages to get the states on board. Now, anybody have anything? Dave, you got anything yet?
Nope, great so far.
Sometimes I just get rolling here, and
Oh, you're killing it.
but, well, yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna run out of things to talk about real quick. So Madison gets this thing signed, and the problem is now that all these states that he has promised to, he's promised them that if you sign on with this thing, I promise you that we'll get a Bill of Rights. Well, these states all want what's coming to them now, right? So, like I said, this becomes a campaign promise for him. But here's what happens: is that Madison now receives hundreds of amendment suggestions from the states. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 that the states want included in this. So because of Article 5 that George Mason managed to get in there, he knows that he needs 2/3 from the House, 2/3 from the Senate, and 3/4 of the states to ratify. So he's able to whittle down 200 down to 19. He sends 19 of them to Congress. Congress approves 12. And of those 12, 10 were ratified by the states in 1791. Your current First Amendment was actually the Third Amendment. The first two were shot down by the states. Don't ask me what they are. I should know that. I should have written that down, but I did not. If somebody wants to look that up real quick, what the
There's
two were.
the Congress's pay and something about the House of Representatives.
That is correct. What was the one about the House of Representatives? Isn't it the way they were?
I don't know.
I think it was the way, something to do with the way they're chosen or the way that they're selected. I don't know. Either way, those two get shot down. These 10 get through, and these 10 are where we're at now. So the first 10 amendments are what are known as the Bill of Rights. Everything after the first 10 are just amendments to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights deals almost solely with individual rights. This doesn't have anything to do with the states, minus the 10th Amendment, which gives power to the states in anything that is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. But you're talking about the First Amendment with freedom of religion, press, expression. The second, obviously, is the right to bear arms. The third is the quartering of soldiers, that they cannot come and live in your house without your consent. Search and seizure is the fourth. Trial, punishment, compensation for takings. Trial and punishment, that's the Fifth Amendment. Right to self-incrimination. Right to speedy trial. Amendment 7 is trial by jury. 8 is cruel and unusual punishment. 9 is the construction of the Constitution, which covers exactly what they were talking about when they were saying, hey, look, if we don't have every single right in here, they're only going to follow the ones that are in writing and they're going to trample the rest. Well, what the ninth says is that no, just because we have these 10 in here doesn't give you the right to violate any other inalienable human rights, God-given rights. And then we got the 10th, which is the fact that the states retain any and all authority that is not given to the federal government, specifically in the Constitution.
Do you want to go back to the two that were not
Yeah,
amended?
sure.
The first would have established how members of the House of Representatives would have been apportioned to the states.
Right.
It was drafted to ensure that members of the House would continue to represent small constituencies, even as the general population grew, small enough that representatives would not be too far removed from the concerns of citizens. In addition, keeping the House of Representatives from being too small was thought to protect against its becoming a kind of oligarchy. Congress did send this amendment to the states, but the number of states that ratified it was just short of the number needed. So although the proposed amendment did not become law, congressional appointment is nevertheless grounded in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, and the total number of members of the House is set by federal statute. So at 435 currently. And then second was the amendment to forbid Congress from giving itself a pay raise. It could vote for a raise, but it would only apply from the beginning of the next Congress. The amendment also failed to gather the number of required state ratifications when it was introduced. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's only going to, only for the next Congress, because they never, ever envisioned somebody sticking around for 47 years, right? I mean, that's what it is. They were like, hey, you know what? The next guys that come can get the raise, not you though. Yeah. 47 years later, here we are voting for their own raises.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, term limits, what?
Joe Biden's been in government longer than life expectancy at that time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
seriously. It's ridiculous. Oh, don't get me started. God, I was in such a good mood.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Just kidding. I can't drink during this meeting.
Not during this
I
meeting,
can't.
Jim.
I can't. You can. I can't. Dave, you got anything?
Only a half hour to bourbon, Jim.
Oh, no, this is gonna be a quick meeting because this is only an overview, right? So,
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.
although I think we're gonna make up for it in the First Amendment. I don't think I'm gonna get through the First Amendment, everything I need to get through in 1 hour. I think that might be
I see the First Amendment being two
at least.
sessions. Yeah.
I
at
try to
least.
stay away from a whole lot of case law. I'm trying to read this thing just kind of originalist. This is how it was written. But the First Amendment is literally nothing but case law. There is so much interpretation with the First Amendment.
Right. Right.
I don't know how we can get away without case law in the First
Have to have
Amendment.
some.
And the Fourth Amendment's going to be the same way.
Agreed. Yep.
We may need a guest to come in and help with that.
Well, and I may have a guest. So, but the Third Amendment, I think, will probably take us about 12 seconds. So we should be,
Probably.
as quick as I can read it, we should be done with that. So, yeah. Nothing else, Dave? Yeah, nothing there. That's actually, yeah, that's about it. So what do you guys think? Bill of Rights. Anybody got anything?
Can we
Dan?
cover the preamble? I have studied the Bill of Rights for years, but never once even read or even really knew about the preamble.
We
Until-
did. Have you looked at the videos on YouTube?
For the Bill of Rights, yes, but they usually just start with number one.
No, I mean ours. We
Oh, yeah.
have,
Here's-
all
yeah.
of our meetings are on YouTube, and that's actually, the preamble was our very first meeting.
The preamble to the Bill of Rights.
Oh, you mean the preamble to the Bill of Rights?
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh, well, I was not. We can.
In
Exactly.
our Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights and Amendments is on page 33.
Yeah, don't you have your rugged, vintage rugged Constitution right here?
I do. Hold on now. I've got so many constitutions.
I say, but for those of you that are following along in this book, it's on page 33.
All right, so I'll be honest, I am not well prepared for the preamble. But let's get into it. We got a half hour.
Yep.
I'm absolutely all about this. So, yeah, does everybody have the preamble up? Is it in the rugged Constitution?
I can try to find it here.
Where's my rugged? I don't know if my rugged, here it is.
Yeah, it's not in the one that I have, but I don't have the same one you guys have.
Yeah, the rugged Constitution starts right with the First Amendment. And I think that's probably why you don't see the preamble of the Bill of Rights very often. Everything always just starts, well, like Daniela said, everything just starts with the First Amendment.
I will share this. So those of you that want to read along can read along. Can you guys see
All
it?
right.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so the preamble of the Bill of Rights. Congress of the United States begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. The conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, the further declaratory, and these are big words for me to read without ever reading this before. I'm doing pretty good. The further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, 2/3 of both houses concurring, that the following articles be proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by 3/4 of the said legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of said Constitution. Articles in addition to and amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America proposed by Congress and ratified by the legislatures of the several states pursuant to the 5th article of the original Constitution. I have to say that is the first time in my life, with all the reading I've done of the Constitution, all the studying I've done, of all the highlighting I've done of the Constitution, that is the first time I've ever read the preamble to the Bill of Rights. And even so much so that when you mentioned it, Daniela, in your comment, I blew it off thinking you were talking about the preamble. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I studied the Bill of Rights a lot, training to go into law enforcement, and not one teacher has ever mentioned it. I just recently stumbled upon it on YouTube. Nobody's ever started a video with it. I didn't even know there was one.
I didn't either till today, right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really. And now, and I will say that looking at the 3rd and 4th clauses there is going to deal with nothing other than getting it passed, and what it was going to take. The 2nd clause is, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to me. And it's everything that we just talked about, is the fact that the several states had expressed a desire. They were explaining in this clause why the Bill of Rights was even necessary.
Yep.
And yeah, and if you break it down, I mean, that's exactly what George Mason was saying. That's what all the anti-federalists were saying. That they wanted it there in order to prevent the abuse of its powers. It's one thing to tell the government what they are allowed, what they're authorized to do when it comes to running the country. But I agree with them. I mean, I think some things need to be spelled out. Some things the government needs to realize that under no circumstances are you going to violate these basic rights of ours, these inalienable rights. Are you going to have a right to ever come in here and tell us that we cannot redress the government? You are not going to tell me who I can and can't worship. But if it is not spelled out, it does leave the door open to the government saying, hey, show me where I can't. George Mason's always been one of my, probably my favorite of the founding fathers, him and Patrick Henry, and both being anti-federalist. But George Mason, man, I mean, the fifth, our Article 5 and the Bill of Rights is George Mason's work. Without George Mason bringing up both of those points, we don't have the right to amend the Constitution as people and as states. And we don't have the Bill of Rights, 100%. They were ready to sign this thing and send it to the states. And really, without the Bill of Rights, chances are we don't have a Constitution, at least not in its current form. It would have been rewritten again. So who knows where we would have ended up.
Well, here's a silly question. Technically, according to this preamble, isn't it up to the states to amend the Constitution, not Congress?
Where do you see that? And no, because the preamble, remember, there is nothing in the preamble that can ever be binding by law, right? The preamble is just a statement about why we are about to do what we're about to do. But where do you see what's given you concern?
Well, it says articles in addition to an amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America proposed by Congress and ratified by the legislatures of these several states pursuant to the 5th article of the original Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that, to me, doesn't that say that, I mean, any amendment has to be kind of approved by the Convention of States?
Well,
As
not the
opposed to
Convention of
this-
States, but every single amendment
Well-
needs to be ratified by the states, right? It's got to be, it can be sent up through 2/3 of each house, but you still need 3/4 of the states to ratify every single amendment.
Right, right.
No
on.
amendment can ever be ratified by, Congress can bring up amendments. They can propose them, but the states still have to ratify.
I read that as the Bill of Rights was essentially done through an Article 5 convention. That's
Okay,
how I read that.
all right.
So I did find another source here, coursehero.com, Bill of Rights preamble summary, and it does have some explanation here. I'll go ahead and bring that up and share this so you guys can see. I think we usually do these things more during our preparation for these rather than on the fly. So
No, for sure. Yeah, it's not,
You
I
can
don't
see
usually jump
this.
right into this thing without.
yeah.
without
So
reading.
I would have to make sure that it's a good source. I'm assuming it's probably a good one here. But just as it reads here, for those that can or cannot see that, the preamble to the Bill of Rights notes that the bill is being presented by the Congress in 1789, when a number of states had already ratified the Constitution, but would like to see additional declaratory and restrictive clauses added in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of the document's powers. Further, to do so will give the public more confidence in the government. 2/3 of both houses have agreed that these articles or amendments be proposed to the legislatures of several states as amendments to the Constitution. If three-fourths of the state legislators ratify the amendments, they will become part of the Constitution. So the analysis then reads, the preamble states that several states have ratified the Constitution based on the promise that a Bill of Rights will be added to the document. Once the Constitution was sent out for ratification, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, had to convince skeptical former colonists that the new government under the Constitution would not simply be a reprise of the tyranny of the British monarchy. Anti-Federalist sentiment clustered mostly around the idea that the Constitution would deprive people of personal liberties and due process of law. This fear caused people like Thomas Jefferson to believe it was unnecessary, or that it was necessary to spell out these rights. Although Madison originally believed the Constitution implicitly ensured people's individual civil liberties, as it was written, he too eventually became convinced a Bill of Rights was necessary, which is why he wrote one and shepherded it through Congress. The Bill of Rights was ratified in Virginia, 1791, the 11th state to do so, and became a permanent part of the U.S. Constitution. History has proven that the fears of Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists were well-founded. Significant groups of the U.S. citizens have been denied fundamental rights throughout history, despite the inclusion of the Bill of Rights. For example, the right to vote, not specifically guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, was denied to a large group of citizens on the basis of their race and sex until 1965 for federal elections and 1966 for state elections. The Civil Rights Movement finally resulted in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Supreme Court decision Harper versus the Virginia Board of Elections in 1966. While the 15th Amendment of 1870 officially outlawed disenfranchising citizens on account of their race, poll taxes, which were fees to be paid before voting, and other measures widely suppressed Black voters. Women only gained the right to vote in federal elections due to the 19th Amendment, 1920, except those women still disenfranchised on the basis of race. Other requirements that a citizen own property and pay taxes were never banned by federal mandate, but often ensured that only more wealthy citizens could vote in most states until the middle of the 19th century. So that was their little analysis on it. I'll post this in our document that we have.
I find it funny when they're saying that Madison came around on this and believed it. Everything I've ever read doesn't say that Madison actually came around and believed anything. That Madison, this was something Madison felt he had to do to save the Constitution. That Madison was backed into a corner. If you remember, Thomas Jefferson did not sign the Constitution. He was not even in the country. Thomas Jefferson was an ambassador to France at the time. He was gone during this whole thing. But there is a letter out there, and I'll see if I can find it, between Thomas Jefferson and Madison, where Jefferson tells Madison, look, you have to have a Bill of Rights. This thing cannot go forward without a Bill of Rights. And Madison responded to him, basically telling him to stop, that he was going to torpedo this whole thing. So I don't know if I believe, based on what I've read, that Madison came around on this thing and was big on the Bill of Rights. Like I said, I think Madison got backed into a corner, and the only way that he could save, and I think whether he came around on it or not, Madison's a hero. He's a patriot, right? I mean, Madison was looking to save the Constitution and to save this country. And he did what he felt he had to do in order to make that happen. And luckily it turned out to be the right move. But had we lost the original Constitution, I mean, man, it could have gone so many wrong ways.
Yes, it could have.
I mean, well, look what happened with the Articles of Confederation, right? I mean, we could have ended up with another Articles of Confederation. We could have ended up with the country fracturing and splitting. And so, whether he actually came around on it or he just did what he had to do to save this country, either way, I'm grateful. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Where's Jeff? I'm sure Jeff will tell me I'm wrong. He likes to call me out in front of everybody.
He does.
Yeah, I'm here, and I'm keeping a list here. I'll call you out at the end.
You're keeping a list of all the wrong stuff I say, are you? Yeah. Make sure you read that list to me after I start drinking, then we'll talk.
No, I'll read it to you after I start drinking. Oh wait, I am drinking.
But Daniela, what's your deal then? So you went through all this stuff when you were looking at law enforcement, or on the legal
first
side?
of all, I wanted to go back to your comment on Madison.
Yeah.
I see Madison as he believed that the Constitution was a Bill of Rights in itself because it said what the government can't do, and therefore everything else is inalienable, or as I just recently learned, unalienable is the time period way of saying inalienable now. So I always wondered what the difference was between those two. But I think
actually only say inalienable only because I didn't think unalienable was right.
Well, they use that in the Constitution, so yeah, it's like period. But I think there's a certain beauty to be noted about Madison's perhaps naivete and love of country, where he believed that you don't have to list it, because if it's not listed in the Constitution as something the government can't do, then we all have that, because this is America, and America is this beautiful thing that you should just assume you have these rights. And I just think that idealized vision of America is quite poetic.
I was actually going to use that same exact word right there when you were talking. It is nothing but naivety.
Yeah.
That he believed that this piece of paper was going to prevent the government from ever overstepping its bounds. And the anti-federalists were like, listen, I'm telling you, we just fought this revolution. We just came from England, and I'm telling you that this is what they're going to do. It is. There's something. There it is. It's the fact that Madison truly believed that his Constitution was going to be enough. And also, I would like to say, where had you been the last? How many? We could have used. We could have used you through art. Listen, now that Danielle's here, we're going to go ahead and start back on Article Article 1. So if you guys can go back to Article 1, Section 1.
I was with you guys the whole time, just by you two.
Yeah.
I think she's a 10.
I know you guys.
What's that, Jeff?
Said I think she's a 10.
I don't know, man. She's
Maybe
not
a
Supreme Court
9.
Justice. I don't know.
So I'm a 10 after I leave class, if back in criminal justice days, or after I watch one of your videos, and then after 2 days I go back to a 5 because I have no.
Well, I'll tell you what I do enjoy. I am very happy that you've watched our videos and yet you're still here. So you didn't lose interest throughout this thing. And so I appreciate it, man. I wish you were here. That was absolutely a beautiful comment. Perfect.
And just an update for next week. Danielle is going to be hosting this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, I'm out.
Well, I would like to have a picnic one day where we can all meet.
Well, I would do it tomorrow, but apparently that's frowned upon. I don't know. Whatever.
We're getting there. Ohio's starting to open.
I'm going to Florida next week.
Maybe we'll have permission by the 4th of July.
Yeah. Maybe we'll be allowed to gather.
I went to a movie.
Hot dog.
You know what? 50 out of 100,000 is an unattainable goal. I don't want to get into this right now, but with a false positive rate of 1%.
But it's
you never get it. It's impossible.
It's also supposed to be over a longer time period too.
Oh yeah, it's 2 weeks instead of the CDC's 1 week.
1 week, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's going to, we're going to get into with the First Amendment, right? I mean, this is the crux of the whole lockdown argument, man. People want to say, well, look, these other countries, they locked down and they're already over this. Well, my thing since this has started has always been these other countries aren't the United States. These other countries don't have a constitution that gives them the right to peaceably assemble. And nowhere in the Constitution, I've read it again because I thought maybe I missed it, does it say except for a pandemic, or except because people are scared, or except because there's some sick people, then you're not allowed to do this stuff. It doesn't say that. It says you are allowed to peaceably assemble. The government, man, there's some real constitutional issues here with these lockdowns, and I understand it's a fine line. I get it.
Yeah.
But then we fall back in the Supreme Court, and they're not doing their job
yet. I'm holding out hope, man.
Yes.
Well, that's all we got at this point.
I'm holding. Yeah, I know. But you know what? Has anybody actually challenged this thing? No.
And who do you challenge it with?
Well, listen, the governments are smart though, right? They're not bringing enforcement on anybody who is assembling. They're saying you can't, and they're strong arming groups into believing that you can't. But as far as I know, there's been no enforcement action taken based on these lockdowns. I know some of the cities have, you read about some of these arrests where people are out during lockdown, but I know all of those are being challenged.
But, I think back to that a gym in, I think it's Philadelphia or someplace that was open last year, and they were punished because the local government, stripped them of their utilities. I mean, had everything shut off.
Yeah.
Well, they seized their bank accounts too,
Yeah. So even though technically,
or froze their bank accounts.
Well,
yeah,
Ohio's
I
doing
mean,
the
they
same
really
thing
were
with
not
bars
able to
liquor
operate
licenses.
because the local government came
Well,
down
no,
on
that's
them.
true though, Mike. That is true. Ohio is going in there and they're raiding these bars and they're citing these people and they're costing them money.
They're taking away their liquor licenses, at least
Yeah.
temporarily.
Right.
Well, there's House Bill, I think 21 in the Ohio Senate right now that, or 121, I forget the number, but it's essentially to reimburse any establishment's financial fee assessments for any violations.
That's all fine and well, except for these places that have been forced to close because of it.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. We'll get into it with the first. I don't want to turn the whole thing next week into a COVID talk. But I mean, it's a contemporary issue for sure. The churches have obviously won. The churches took them on, and the churches, they've backed way off the churches now. Them telling churches that they can't have in-person services and the like, they've won that. But the whole peaceably assembling and, well, God, man, the First Amendment, this is going to take us. There's rabbit holes. No matter where you step, you're stepping into a rabbit hole right now with the First Amendment, right? With the censoring that's going on. I'm not one that believes that Facebook and Twitter are private entities that can just willy-nilly censor people and shut down accounts. I know that's the argument right now, but the fact is that Facebook and Twitter are all the way the world communicates, man. And I think this needs to be hashed out in court. I just, I mean, you got Amazon actually, although I heard, and I haven't been back. I heard the Parler app's back. Is the app working? I forgot all about it till I was just talking about it.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
back.
That is what I heard.
That is interesting.
So what's my favorite?
Yeah, it's been up for a couple of weeks. I've
It
been
is
on
up.
it.
It's working right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
Interesting.
to log back in.
Very interesting.
Sure enough.
Good.
So I'd like to know who, anybody know who's hosting them?
Probably find out.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
yeah, you can find out pretty easy.
You could. That's why I asked.
Sorry.
Renee's on it.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
All right. Well, listen, it's 8:55. Does anybody have anything else on the Bill of Rights? And we will get into it starting next week. I know it's going to go 2 weeks. I know it is.
It will.
I'd
will.
Silk.
What's that?
Sky Silk. Looks
Yeah,
like,
but who is that?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
a infrastructure company based outside of Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
Sky Silk.
Yeah.
Trump.
I was just going to say it's being run by
I can,
Donald Dump.
Works for me.
Right, not Trump Industries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I said, I'd like to just burn right through the First Amendment. I just don't know how we're going to do it. There's just so much to talk about. And
It's going to take 2 weeks.
The Second Amendment's going to be another.
they were founded in 2015.
Oh,
Hmm.
you know who else was founded in 2015? 45.
It was a nonprofit for him.
Yeah. So anybody got anything on the Bill of Rights before we end this thing? Questions, concerns,
No, well done.
just on the origin? Well, thanks, because this
Did
was
you-
last minute.
Jim, did you want to do the drawing for that flag or no?
Yeah, I just don't have it going. You know what? Here, I did not pick up that flag from Wayne, which is why I didn't do the drawing for the flag. We still got, it was from the last meeting, right, Renee? That's when we did it. Yeah. If you were there at the last meeting, I'm gonna do that maybe tonight. I'll just share my screen. Maybe we can do it tonight, in the after. I'll get all the names in there. And then, I might have something cool to give away. We won't do it this, so we'll do it next week. Let's
Where
see.
do you go for the after party?
Oh, don't tell her. Nope, don't tell her.
But I'll bring it
Brian.
on.
No, we can't tell you because we usually just go and talk about you. So it's gonna be weird.
Go to the Everyday Constitution page and there will be a link that you can get in.
Oh,
Yes,
welcome.
there'll be a link on the Constitution page that I'll post as soon as we're done. We like to keep it separate so that we can keep the discussion more
The riffraff.
focused.
Just
I
that was
know,
the
Renee, you're
first
the
comment
police.
from Swank tonight.
You're the political police, Renee.
I try to be.
Yeah. So yeah, just so you know, this, the next one is going to be a lot more political. It's a lot more conservative based and there's a lot of drinking going on usually. So
Yes.
good luck.
Everybody come.
Started.
Oh,
Everybody
I
comes
don't
out to
try, I don't
Perry.
try to police the post discussion. It's not recorded and it's out there. So
It's actually the
point.
same link though, right?
it's a different link.
No, it's a different link.
Oh crap, I gotta copy another one.
Yeah, sorry.
It's the same link we usually use.
Yeah, it's
for
the same one we usually use for posts. So if you see the post one, it'll be the same. It's just I post it every week because some people can't find it. So,
Gotcha.
Because they've been drinking the last week.
or even during the meeting, the discussion time, and
All right. I am out then. I will see you
Okay.
guys over in the post. Figure out how to get out of here. There we go.
okay, I will stop the recording
All right. If
and
nobody has any other questions on this?